Serve, learn, and earn. Are we online?
See up there, it now says live.
Oh, yeah, that's a big improvement. I
Yeah.
noticed that yesterday. Come on.
Okay. So we're going back to H703, and there's a section of the bill dealing with serve, learn, and earn, something that I was not familiar with. I don't know if other committee members were. How long is that? I'll go. Let's get into your testimony in a second. We'll just get my file out.
Okay, file is here. This is here. You have a whole history and progress of it. Oh my gosh.
Rex, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you're representing, and then you can explain to us what serve, learn, and earn is.
That sounds great. For the record, I'm Brett Knopf from Huntington, Vermont, and I'm an executive director at Vermont Conservation Corps. It's nice to see all of you again. Senator Brock, I don't know if we've met. I think I've been in a committee before, but we haven't formally met, so nice to meet you. Good morning. I understand that workforce development is a focus of this committee. That's terrific. We are excited and grateful for the opportunity to share a bit more about our collaboration, which we call Serve, Learn, and Earn. The partnership, strategies, accomplishments, impact. We have a slide deck which we can share. We can share it in a lot of fashion here. I know, Chris, you also have it, so it could even go up on the screen here behind me. Nice work. Thank you.
But then Randy's gonna need his binoculars, right?
Yeah. Well, David didn't come across with them today.
So I think what I can do is I can quickly walk through the slide deck. That'll take 5-7 minutes or so. And then I'll pass the mic over to Ronnie, Tom, and David. And then, that's maybe 15 minutes, and then we can have a conversation and answer questions.
Sounds perfect.
Dig in deeper. So I'm on slide 1 here. Maybe I could just give Chris you Scott, sorry. I know another Chris Moore, so Scott, thank you. So slide 1 here. Let's start with just a little bit of history and context of how our organizations came to be working together. In the past, pre-COVID, we had all collaborated, though not in the way in which we're collaborating more. At the midpoint of 2020, VYCC was really thinking about how can we enhance the quality of our experiences, make them more accessible, and bring them to more people in Vermont. And as we were noodling that, it really became clear that we could do it ourselves, or we'd have greater impact if we were doing this in partnership with other organizations. So we set about looking for other organizations that were mission aligned but had slightly different complementary programs. And that's how the 4 of us came to be working together. We're all working to offer training that's paid training that completes projects that benefit Vermont. And that's really the through line between our 4 organizations. I think there's also a philosophical connection where we're feeling like if you are a young person and you're willing to step up and serve your state, or even an older person willing to step up and serve your state, that there should be a clear and accessible, viable pathway to future learning or future career. And that's very much what we're all dedicating ourselves to, and that's what Serve, Learn, and Earn is all about. Next slide, please. I want to say thank you to the legislature and this committee for being supportive of a legislative appropriation from the last session. It's really enhanced our impact, and I can share some of the details there in just a second. Also want to thank Commissioner Snyder and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation for being a terrific partner. VYCC in particular has a long history with FBR. That's just only been strengthened through this partnership. A detail here is that the appropriation flows through FBR, and we have our relationship and history with FBR has made that possible.
You got 1.85 million last year for the 4 organizations.
Correct. Yep.
Is
This is
there
the first year.
First year. That's right.
And is there any how does that get divided equally, makes that decision?
That gets divided proportionally based on the number of service weeks that each of our respective organization is offering participants.
Number of workers that you have?
Number of worker weeks.
Weeks.
Yeah.
So-
Worker trainees, or, you know, so they're not staff, it's not a count of staff, but of trainees, people, members who are serving, who in some cases are co-enrolled as AmeriCorps members.
So you include AmeriCorps in this?
Yeah. Participant week center would be the answer, not employee weeks.
And that's dependent on organizational too. So Vermont Works for Women doesn't have AmeriCorps.
Why don't you all introduce yourselves for the record, so that when you have this lovely conversation, we all know who you are.
When we jump in with unsolicited.
No,
Yeah.
My name is Tom Longstreth. I'm the Executive Director of Resource.
I'm Ronnie Basson, the Executive Director at Vermont Works for Women.
And David Mears, Executive Director at Audubon, Vermont.
So I'm guessing that VYCC is probably has greater numbers than the rest of the groups, or that's not true?
BYCC and Resource are pretty comparable in size.
Okay,
And a portion of the funds also were set aside for FPR projects that some of our crews work on.
maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but one of the things or ahead of the group, one of the things that I've expressed as we've gone through this section is I don't know where serve, learn, and earn is in statutory language anywhere, and whether it's a incorporated entity or it's just a
No, the way in which it was structured last year was FPR was authorized to establish to support VYCC for the purpose of establishing a serve, learn, and earn program.
Okay,
That's why you don't see it as that, yeah.
so a question I had was that, so Forest Parks and Recreation established serve, learn, and earn, or VYCC established it?
VYCC established it in partnership with these three organizations.
Right,
And then there's one grant agreement between VYCC and FPR. And then VYCC is responsible for creating sub-awards to Resource, Vermont Works for Women, and Audubon, Vermont.
okay.
Yeah, good question. So I'm on this third slide here, making the point that a key and I would say unifying component of our programs is that the participants, not only are they being paid, not only are they learning and getting training, but they're also completing high priority projects. So conservation, weatherization, food security, outdoor recreation, public lands, infrastructure, those are all areas of focus. We're also on the front lines, I would say, of key social issues, not just workforce development, but climate change, gender equity, ensuring access to traditionally underserved communities. In the next couple of slides 4 and 5, you can see the geographic scope of our work, both in terms of where participants are from, as well as where the projects are being completed. We're really from the Northeast Kingdom on down to Brattleboro, from Groton on down to Dorset. This is very much a statewide initiative. And then next slide 6. Earlier this year, and this is part of the grant conditions that we've established with Forest Parks and Rec, we submitted an interim report that captured and measured how we're faring in terms of hitting certain deliverables and targets. We're on track to hit or exceed all of those targets. So in the first 7 months, we hired 252 participants. Those participants completed over 2,100 service weeks. Of those 252 participants, 85, Senator Clarkson, this goes to your question, 85 were AmeriCorps members. That's of particular relevance, I think, because each AmeriCorps member not only receives a stipend or a wage, but they also get what's called the Siegel Education Award, which can be used to defray the cost of continued education, pay off debt, pay for tuition, what have you.
So may I just ask
Yeah,
you
yeah.
a follow, in that situation, what are you contributing to that, to their presence? I mean, are you also paying them an
Yeah.
additional
Right,
stipend?
so they'll get.
Because I know how poorly they're paid.
Right, so they'll receive a stipend.
So even though
I
they
can, they'll receive a stipend, and I can share thanks to this funding. And this year, VYCC's increased compensation by about 26%. So base compensation on average for our participants is about $15 an hour. We move the stipend, it's not hourly wage, but if you average it out, that's what it equates to. And in addition to that, there's a Siegel Education Award, which they'll get upon completion of their.
right, and
their
only
service.
AmeriCorps gets that.
And AmeriCorps provides that.
Right.
And only AmeriCorps members get that, that's right. Yeah.
So just before you, I mean, these are results, but we have no context for the results. What were the goals for each of these categories? Or this is just the participants? I mean, this is.
The interim season.
So the interim, the numbers that I shared, the 252 participants.
Yeah,
2,100 service weeks, that was the interim progress report. The first year of funding expires, if you will, at the end of June, and those numbers that are on that, on your page there are the targets that we're striving for.
okay, so these are the goals,
Those are the goals, yeah.
Great.
We've also taken a look at what we think will be possible over the next 3 years. We think that over the next 3 years, we can enroll 1,700 participants who in total would complete 13,000 service weeks. So we're interested in establishing a program, strengthening a program, expanding a program that will increase in size in the coming years.
So your goal in 3 years is 1,700 participants and
13,000 service weeks. Yes.
Do you have any early tracking in terms of where they're going after the program?
Yeah, and I think Tom, Ronnie, and David can speak to that. Yep. That's a good
key
about that.
question.
Yeah. So the next few slides, I can just go through quickly.
Can I ask?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Do you have demographics for the participants?
Yeah. Yep.
15 to
I don't have them for all organizations. VYCC, just a few statistics I was looking at the other day. 38% of our participants are cisgender men. So what that shows is that the majority are not. We're also looking at socioeconomic trends. We're looking at racial composition. We're looking at members who are part of the LGBTQ+ community. We're seeing more and more of those programs. And that's through our own recruitment, and it's also done in partnership with other organizations who are, I would say, more focused on that particular demographic.
Can you tell me how you track longer term results?
I would say we're at a point now where it's a great question. We're doing that more anecdotally than systematically. I think there's a real interest in amongst the four of us to build capacity to do that over the long term.
Greg, I could speak a little bit on the new system that resource
Sure.
in place if you want. I mean, because of this challenge we have two classes of training programs. One is work experience, where the outcome is not necessarily placement into a job, and then we have our workforce development job, training positions where the expectation really is a job. Those are much easier to measure because we have employment rate that we put them into. We have how many we placed into jobs, whether they're retained in that job, whether they're still working in that job or another job at 6 months, and then again at 12 months. So we have really good measures for the workforce development programs. We have less good measures for work experience, and to overcome that, we put in place a system where we have sets of outcomes that are expected outcomes for all trainees that are defined very clearly because we have 24 different placement types. So for each of those placement types, we define a set of expected outcomes. So for example, a work experience student who's in their high school but has a developmental disability, we will expect them to develop interview proficiency skills and develop a resume. Those are a couple of examples. Almost all of our trainees get those as an example. And so we report whether they actually accomplish that, whether they develop those interview proficiency skills. Some are a little softer than others because, has someone developed interview proficiency skills? That's a little bit, it's not a concrete thing we can say you obtained an industry recognized skill certification. That's another type of credential that we issue in some of the outcomes we measure. So we've rolled this system out and really are starting, have very good numbers now on all of our trainees in terms of what they're accomplishing, whether they've met the goals we defined for the program. And so we'd be happy to share that information.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we ought to think about more broadly, not just in these programs, but about everything that we support, is that you often can have good results at the 3-month range, 6-month range, 1-year range, but it's that long-term longitudinal study, if you will, of whether or not this actually makes any difference.
Yep.
Of almost anything we do. Is a great academic study, if nothing else, to say if there's a control group of people who didn't get any of these supports compared to those who do the people who do, in the long term, actually get any better or do any better overall.
So we're affiliated with Youth Build USA, and Youth Build is one of the programs we offer. Youth Build has done a random control study, so there is actually data on that, which is a nationwide program. We were a part of that, and the outcomes are show that it does provide meaningful, measurable differences compared to folks who aren't selected.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously that kind of result is powerful in helping us decide, is this a worthy investment for the long term compared to the other things that are presented to us when there's a limited amount of resources available for many, many worthy things.
I will also say that the brilliance of kind of this collaboration and program is the way our organizations train and then continue to work with participants. So yes, we're offering that certification, hard skills, employment readiness training through the paid experience, but then I know for Vermont Works for Women, they transition immediately into our employment services. So they get a one-on-one coach, they continue to be a part of the organization, they're tracked throughout that time to see. We also track potential reasons why participants aren't accepting jobs. So it's childcare, transportation, family concerns, schooling issues. And so these also help us address some of those barriers when we're working with employers about how can you not only recruit in that onset, which there quite often are jobs taken right on the onset, but then maybe people have to leave for whatever the challenge might be. We're able to better address that with the employer early on to say, here are some of the barriers our participants face, here are some of the resources that we've put in place, and we're always there available for the participant and the employer to hopefully see those long-term gains in that as well, and to really find those key points where maybe people are falling through the cracks.
So just to ground us a little bit, following up on Senator Brock's question, how do you distinguish what you folks do from the money we put into apprenticeship training or on-the-job training or other?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, I read out. I mean, one of the differences is, a lot of the people we are serving are coming out of poverty. They're have significant barriers to employment that we're helping to overcome. And I mean, this is part of some of my presentation, so maybe there's a preview of it. But I think in this economic climate right now, the challenge is how do we get more people into the workforce? And I think that the governor a few years ago came to, I'm on the Workforce Development Board, and complained or raised concerns around the declining employment rate and the sort of increasing we were approaching a 1-to-1 ratio of employed people to non-employed and out of the workforce and dependents essentially, and that was a real concern. I think the ratio has gone worse since then. These programs that we're each supporting, and this funding is supporting, is helping both sides of it because it's taking people who are not in the workforce, who have these barriers, it's coaching them, providing them with skills, it gives them the job, gives them employment, but then it moves them into jobs. And that is helping both sides of that ratio. And so I think we're meaningfully making a difference in terms of the economy. And for example, many of resources programs are in construction and weatherization. We're developing new ones in HVAC and manufacturing. And they're designed specifically, the workforce development ones are designed to specifically to take someone out of who's not working and move them into a job. Our intensives, that happens in 6 weeks. And then we continue to support them so that they're successful in that job placement. And so, we feel like we're really there's a very powerful impact in terms of the return on the investment. Essentially, the government's making an investment in this program, but recouping it in future tax returns from employed individuals, combined with lower payments for supporting services.
And I'd also, we've historically been running these programs as organizations collectively, I think about 150 years. So we're also tapping into populations that are underemployed or underrepresented or don't see these viable pathways. And so we have, whether it's youth programming or adult programming, to want to attract them to the program and then really work with them in more kind of an individual, holistic basis to really remove those barriers to then get them immediately into work. And I think that's some of the brilliance of the collaboration is, as organizations, we've individually done that. It's only gotten stronger and grown to new communities through the collaborative effort.
And how? I guess I have a question, which is, how do you find your participants? Because some of them, I think, are coming up through some of your programs with high schools, because there's very strong collaborations with high school people who kind of fall off the rails in high school. But how do you get your adults in? So that's a question. Is where do you find your participants? And I guess the other question is, are some of these are duplicative or seem to be of other apprenticeships in in construction and in plumbing, and I mean, are you partnering with the apprenticeship opportunities that already exist within these opportunities or these work areas that you've identified? Because there are a bunch of them.
Yeah. Well, let me, in order to be, the definition of an apprenticeship, as I know you know, is that you're employed. And the challenge is that most of the trainees, at least resources working with, I should be careful. Each of our programs are pretty different. And we each are experts on our own programs. And so I want to be careful not to speak for everyone. But our trainees would not be able to get that first job because they have some sort of barrier. The employers just wouldn't consider them. So they need our training program before they get into that apprenticeship. We're also finding, we would love to place more of our trainees into apprenticeships. For many, they're not ready for that, and the employers aren't ready for it, because an apprenticeship is really, in some cases, a 4-year commitment of, I'm going to move you through this, and I see you becoming a master plumber or a master electrician.
So you're getting them ready for apprenticeships in some cases.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. The other, you had a second question?
No, how do you find your participants?
Oh, how do we find participants? It really depends by program. Our youth build program, as you were alluding to, I think is well connected with school systems and kids who are in high school but not succeeding or at risk of dropping out or have dropped out. And so we
just haven't gotten excited about it.
Yeah, and are really disengaged with the high school experience is just not working for them for different reasons. So that's one sort of recruitment channel that's pretty tied to schools. The second, for adults, we work very closely with Higher Ability, Folk Rehab, formerly named, and really that's one of the agencies we work closest with to get referrals from people who have barriers and disabilities, unable to go directly.
And I would say, it's interesting. Well, yes, we do run youth programming in our Trailblazers program. We also run in the tech centers with this as well to support female enrollments. It's 16 plus, but our highest demographic is really 23 to 38. So that's the highest number of participant ages we get. And majority of how we get participants is they're underemployed women who want to be upskilled to get into a new field. And so that's the majority of what we hear. A lot of our recruitment just comes from our relationships with community organizations or state agencies. And similar to how Thomas explained, a lot of our participants don't qualify for some of the financial benefits, whether it's a residency requirement. They're too young and they're still in their parents' income. If they've already used some of the non-degree funds, they just don't have that. So our programs are free, provide a training program, and give you that certificate to really get you on your feet quickly.
And non-degree grants historically have run out after a few months, and so there's not enough there hasn't been enough for that to be the only source of funding for this. But that is one of the other additional sources we have used for many training programs that's been helpful for many trainees.
The only other piece that I would add to speaking about apprenticeships and how our programs are different than an apprenticeship. If you are going to enroll in an apprenticeship, as Tom said, it's a multi-year commitment. And if you aren't necessarily sure that that's what you want to do, you could start down that track and then stop, and it's I won't say it's been a waste of time, but it doesn't achieve the goal that we all want to achieve. Whereas what BYCC does is it often offers introduction to many different types of conservation, carpentry, agricultural experiences. And so you can kind of get a sampler, if you will, and then say, oh, I really know that I want to go into the trades. I want to be a carpenter in this. So then you can go to an apprenticeship.
Right, so it is kind of training to choose.
Yeah, but it is a job. And so there's a real world aspect to it that I think is relevant.
Right.
And let's go quickly to slide 11. If
Yeah.
you good, because I think what this shows is some of the certificate and education partners that are kind of within the same pantheon of apprenticeships, if you will. And you'll see there's forestry down in the lower left here. There's obviously some safety, wilderness risk management, wilderness first aid. We're also partnering more and more with higher ed. So this summer, BYCC crew leaders will be able to get 12 credits by being a crew leader at BYCC. One of the exciting pieces there is those credits are a la carte, as you were. It's not just a 112 credit block, but there's different components. What that means is that it then kind of sets a foundation that we can build upon to offer not just crew leaders, but also AmeriCorps members, Corps members who come into BYCC to get credit. And I think in the coming years, for participants who work at Resource or Vermont or Vermont Works for Women. I think more and more we're seeing the need for alternative pathways to continue learning beyond the traditional model, and this is how we're trying to be innovative and responsive. So let's pause here, see if Ronnie or David has anything more to say, or Tom for that matter, and then circle back. We have a specific request that we'd like you all to consider. So let's first answer a bit more questions before getting to that final piece.
And so, just following up, in what section are you in this bill?
Yeah, there's
Page 703, yeah, we're close to the end, I believe.
It's on page 59, it's section 40, and the longest slide deck, but the shortest section. It is one paragraph.
Is this the $2 million?
Yeah.
Is that, what did the governor propose,
We weren't included in the governor's jobs budget.
Okay. And your request is
Our request
12 million over 3 years.
over 3 years. So I can speak to that. Would it be helpful to speak to that, Senator?
Yeah, in a second. I'm looking at section 11 of the bill that's titled Work-Based Learning and Training Program. And I know I asked about apprenticeships before, but it seems like this whole new program that looks, I'm just trying to understand the difference between what the state's doing through the Department of Labor and what you're doing. And I don't know how much money.
I mean, I can't speak to what the Department of Labor is doing necessarily, but some of the coach, some of it appears to be efforts to improve some of the connectivity, try to have employees at Department of Labor who can support people connect with employers, which is, I think, an important piece. Our own experience is that without a relationship that we build through our training programs, provided with the skill building, that just the relationship, trying to connect, matchmaking, so to speak, isn't going to be very effective without a deeper level of training and commitment to the individual. So, we develop a real trust with the trainees we serve We know them very well. That helps us coach them into the right job. And it means we also are willing to go out on a limb and get our reputation to an employer to say, this trainee is going to be good for you. You're going to be happy with this. And when we then, talk to get feedback from the employers, they are thrilled. Especially, nowadays, it's just so hard. They really appreciate the work we're doing. So I think there's similarities with what the Department of Labor is doing, but I don't think our trainees could be successful with the approach that the Department of Labor is taking.
Well, I would add that the best way to train someone for the workforce is to give them a job.
Yeah.
And we know that they're going to be ready for the workforce because we've given them a job. And the lion's share of the funds that we're requesting are to offer jobs. And the reason that, well, I'm repeating myself here a little bit, so I just would say that the relationships piece is important too. When we spoke at the same time.
No, and I also, it was the same extension as these programs are running right now today. They're already in action. A lot of what's being proposed at Department of Labor is new to try to build those connection points and to try to figure out why workers are not necessarily going to those programs in larger numbers. And I do know just from the female perspective, women do not represent high numbers whatsoever across the board unless they're in childcare or nursing apprenticeship. So you're not seeing underrepresented talent really accessing those in larger numbers, and it's because it doesn't have a model that supports what they need to really be successful. So I think it's great that there's alternative approaches to what we're doing as well, but I'll also say this is something we're doing in conjunction, and we do work with Department of Labor. I do know what they're trying to build, and there is a database system to connect what we're doing with what they're already doing. So there is a lot of cross collaboration, but there are some programmatic differences that really just give people a sense of agency in what we're best.
I mean, Mr. Chair, you've heard me say this, but I think navigation has become the graveyard of empires here. Like, we've put money into these connections year after year for UVM to do or the state to do, and I think they have more explaining to do for $1.5 million about how that will actually leverage and create jobs than this program has for $2 million that we know is leveraging a lot of other dollars and creating a lot more jobs.
I look at this section 11 work-based learning and training, it jumps out at me that they would actually be reaching out to you folks to do some of their work or to place these folks through you. Right? It just seems to be a lot of overlap. So you've gotten almost $2 million last year. In this bill, you're getting $2 million. You'd like $3 million. That's basically you're basically in base funding at this point. Every year you're going to come back with this money. It's a new base program. And I would like, and I don't fault you for that, and I don't say it's wrong, but I would like to know what are we getting for this new base programs? How much of an expansion is it for you? Is this doubling your budget or?
Maybe this would be a good thing because I speak to some of this. I think Brian may speak to some of this. Could we sort of park your question, do our?
Well, we're gonna have, this is longer than I thought. Why don't you answer the question now?
Okay.
Tom, I'd like to jump in too.
Yeah. Well, so for resource, what we are proposing with this 3-year growth and having a 3-year timeline where it allows us to invest in new programs. One of the things is we currently operate 2 youth build programs. These are the 16 to 24-year-olds who have dropped out of high school and they need skill training. We operate in Barrie and Burlington currently, and what we do with this support is to grow to 6 communities. So we have 4 new programs. The other thing is we're actively trying to expand our intensives. And so we have intensives that we've been doing in Construction 101, in Weatherization 101. And we've operated those for a couple of years, but have significantly expanded them with the funding provided last year and some support from hireability. We are now, next month, about to run a program in HVAC, which you're probably aware of, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, which is a huge need in order for us to make, switch over our heating systems. We need to install thousands of heat pumps. So there's a bunch of areas where we're really short on the number of workers, and HVAC is one of them. The other is manufacturing, and so the other growth areas that add a intensive related to manufacturing and logistics, and so those are being rolled out this year, and we hope to expand them with this.
In the areas where you presently work, is there more space or demand from students or youth or whatever to?
So most of our programs have run in the communities where we have operated, in Burlington especially. We've got a great relationship with the city of Burlington. They've supported a number of these programs.
Is there more demand for
Yes.
those
Yes,
services?
I mean, so essentially, we're taking these programs across the state. And so we're now, we just finished a program in St. Albans, we're gonna be in Rutland later this year, we're gonna be Springfield, Brattleboro. I mean, so we're really rolling out to hit every single county in the state, because there is demand, there is amongst, construction employers, contractors are struggling in each county to hire enough workers. And so there's a need, and there's people who are out of work on the sideline in each of these regions. But we really believe that we need to bring it to them.
If I could, I want to speak just for a moment. I know we're running out of time. Just a slightly different way of thinking about this. Understand the challenge of having, making sure that you're good stewards of the public funding. These groups, Audubon is a newcomer to the service learning sector. We're learning a lot from these groups, but in these groups, you have established programs. They will exist whether you give them funding or not. They will continue to do good work. What the public funding did last year, and what we're asking to do and think makes sense, a good public investment, is not building a whole new program somewhere else. These programs exist. They have strong partnerships. They have proven records and putting people into jobs. What the public funding is doing is supercharging their effort at a moment where the state needs supercharging in the workforce development area. So that's the way I would look at it as a public steward of the funding. This is the best possible investment you could make in the workforce area. And the soft skills that Breck refers to, when the best way to give someone a job, to get them to learn how to work, is to give them a job. They come, you have probably heard this from employers. The challenge for employers is getting people to show up, to dress professionally, to behave as part of a team, to understand what work ethic is. When they come through our programs, that they come out the other end with that. And the other thing that's happening here that's unique is that I think I seldom saw it as a public servant, is when nonprofit organizations on their own volition start to build a collaborative effort. Because what this group is bringing is, you ask about recruitment challenges or surveys to see how our long-term results are. It makes very little sense for each of these nonprofits to do that work separately and individually. It makes a lot more sense for us to do it collectively. And honestly, we are not intending for this to be a closed circle. We hope that over time that other service learning organizations in Vermont and the region will become part of our network. And that this will become something that kind of perpetuates itself on the ground.
So who will make that decision? There's a check going out for $2 million, or and it goes to this group called Serve Learn or whatever. And who makes the decision? Who's part of the group that can qualify for state funds?
Right now, we have no formal governance. It's really the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation are the two kind of formally recognized entities in state statute, and they have a long-standing relationship. So at the moment, it's Breck who instigated this and catalyzed this work, and it's probably in the lead position to do that.
So do you have an MOU?
But we have an MOU, yeah. And we collaborate. So I think how a network would grow is an open question for us to sort out.
Well, and it sounds like you actually, to go back to your DOL question, I think DOL would use you as a way to funnel people once they've identified people. I mean, they would be helpful in identifying participants. If you're trying to get to 1,700 participants, the DOL can be an active partner in helping find this. I would think they would be sending people. You're right. What's your total budget a year now? Or do you have a sense of that after only operating for a year?
Well, BYCC's is $5 million a year.
Oh, so you don't, So you're just still all,
Yeah.
you're on
Yeah, it's
separate.
not-
We use it as reimbursement. So we reimburse, there's a participant, we have a formula figured out for how this all breaks up. And so yes, it's proportional to what you're running. So it's based on a reimbursement. We submit it to BYCC and then it's reimbursed.
So after 1 year, do you have a sense of what the total cost of this particular aspect of your work is?
We have worked up the overall budget. We can get back to you with that number. It's the multiplier effect is substantial. We're investing much more in this program through private philanthropy than the state is.
Oh,
We're using these funds to invest, basically to pass through to increase the number of participants that we serve and increase the quality of the service that we give them and increase the compensation.
so the 252 participants you currently have, how long do you keep them to train? My guess is it's varied. And how many are now in jobs of those 252? You have 100.
Well, I
You've
think,
placed almost all. Have you placed them
yeah,
all?
I mean, again, I think we have an interim report we've submitted that I think we've shared with you. We can share again. And we have a proposal for the 3-year, full funded project that also really explores what those outcomes would be. And so I
Right.
think we could share that. We could highlight some of that. I mean, just, we were
Because they could
talking.
be staying where they've been placed, that employer may want to keep them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then they may be right for employment elsewhere.
Exactly, yeah. And we all run differently. So some are year-long programs. Vermont Works Women are 7-week cohorts. So we run multiple cohorts throughout the year and we can
So
do
it ranges.
cohorts of up to 20 women at a time. And we do those across the state. So there's South Burlington, Rutland, and Brattleboro, and Barry. And we cycle them around and we partner with employers that are in that community. And all of the work experiences are done in those communities. They can choose to extend at those work experiences, or there's an open job fair at the end of graduation that they can go to.
Very quick thoughts here. BYCC's programs, you can participate for a month or you can participate for a year. It really depends on how big a bite of the apple you want. Most of our conversation this morning has been about people. For good reason. I don't want us to leave the room today without saying that an investment in serve, learn, and earn is not just an investment in people, it's also an investment in infrastructure. It's an investment in conservation, it's an investment in food security. So there's these other outcomes that are the byproduct of the work of our participants. And that feels, so Tom mentioned a proposal that we pulled together. We pulled it together for the House Committee. Certainly share that with you all this afternoon. In that, look at the project outcomes that are articulated there, because those feel equally important to not.
Yeah, I mean, we're building affordable housing, we're weatherizing homes, and so the students are doing that, and I think that service component is fundamental, critical, common area, common in all of our programs. So you're not only getting folks into jobs, getting them skills, but then you're accomplishing things for Vermont that are really important. And I had one short closing thing, but maybe I'll wait. Sorry.
I mean, I've had the honor of seeing it in action right from the beginning with Vermont Works for Women, watching them build affordable houses, watching them be dedicated in Springfield as families were moving in. So, I mean, it's powerful. And we were training, best, what is TJ fond of saying? The best public safety is a good paying job. I mean, if every person leaving our corrections had that kind of training and that kind of job opportunity, we'd be in a great place.
Is it correct that in certain circumstances, the participants are paid by your organizations? Are there other circumstances which employers pay as well? Or is it solely
not
paid
for us.
through your programs?
No,
It's all through ours. We do that for the intention of not guaranteeing
Okay.
an employee to an
Understood.
employer. Yeah.
Secondly, do you collect the following data? The total number of participants served,
yes.
Yeah.
the number of participants who receive wage assistance or other financial assistance as part of the program,
Yes.
the average wage of participants at the start of the program, the average wage 1 year after completion.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the number of work-based
I
learning
would
or
say
training.
no from BYCC's perspective.
No to that, yes, okay. The number of work-based learning or training opportunities
That are available to each participant outside of our organization.
within your organization.
Oh, yeah.
During the course of the
Yes.
training program, and the number of employers who offer a work-based learning or training opportunity.
Yes.
Yes.
Because this is what is required in section 11 of the Department of Labor program. And I shared Senator Sorokin's concern that there appears to be a significant duplication in a way. I realize they're different, but the two leveraged together, I think could be powerful.
And we're gonna have Sarah Brooks on the I know this morning. So one final question before you follow up. Did you make this request to Forest and Parks or this $12 million?
Commissioner Snyder's well aware, yeah.
He's a big fan.
And so, but they decided not to put any money and made some progress.
I'm not aware of the conversations that Commissioner Snyder might have had with Governor Scott.
And is the connection to Forest and Parks because of your organization? Because it doesn't seem like. These
So
two
when
organizations.
BYCC was started, in statute, we were actually part of the Agency of Natural Resources and Forest Parks and Recreation. And so that's really the genesis of the history and the statute that makes a special connection between BYCC
And we had a
and
real
FDR.
good session with Commissioner Snyder, and I assume this is working well. It does strike me that this money probably should be going through the Department of Labor to you rather than the Department of Forest and Parks. And I know that's something you probably would dread, but.
I would not do that.
I would.
In an ideal world, I think you're
I
right.
appreciate your suggestion, but why change something that?
No,
is
I
a really
understand the
good problem?
practical realities of
We
the
can hire a
work, but
coordinator to coordinate the two.
we wouldn't
Because
want.
that's what it implies.
Well, and Tom and I serve on State Workforce Development Board, and this is what the subcommittee that you heard about a little bit is, this is where the alignments need to happen. I mean, that, I agree with you. Ideally, that's exactly
When
what
we did meet with Commissioner Gresham, we did make this proposal, back in the fall, but for whatever reason, did not make it into the governor's budget.
You weren't in the governor's budget, I assume, the year before either. You managed to get in.
and
Well, listen, this has
Jim,
been helpful. It's good to hear from you.
It's
You
exciting.
guys do great work, so.
And let us know, I mean, quite honestly, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So if you have projects that are in our necks of the wood, reach out to your legislators and ask them to come see what's happening on the ground.
Absolutely.
All of us need to be aware of the workforce growth opportunities happening near us. So I think we'd all appreciate that.
I just want to say too, I think good systems thinking doesn't fit well into state government and how we do our budgets. We're all, three committees are talking about weatherization and, creating jobs at the intersection of environment and social change. This is what's actually working. It's a big if, but if the federal government got its act together to fund a lot of the visionary things it hopes to fund around civilian climate corps and, infrastructure and getting a diverse group of people in jobs, investing in communities that have been underinvested in, advancing service, expanding AmeriCorps, this is the program where the money would make the most sense to go, not the Department of Labor to create a new database. This is actually creating jobs and putting people on the ground who have not had jobs in this arena before that are the jobs of the future. So this feels like a very small investment that I would potentially propose increasing into something that's working, that is visionary in the long term.
I think she just gave you a closing speech.
Pretty good.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all,
That's
great to
great.
see you all.
Yeah.
Let me know some people.
So
Keeping the seat
Tom,
warm for
I'd
you,
love to hear your closing speech.
Am I keeping the seat
Oh,
warm for you?
thank you for attending.
I don't know when our next state workforce development board meeting is.
I feel like we've kept you on the seat for a long time. I was gonna give you my chair.
Well,
Frustrating.
I'm not sure.
Is that the one with 64?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been-
64 members
It's
from
been
the
pared
board.
down,
Oh, okay.
but, so, I agree with you, but without the data, if the data, they don't have the ability to set up that whole system to track, I mean, individually, because they're still all individual. That's where DOL could be very helpful, is actually having
They
a
could be.
central. I know, I know,
We can
I know,
continue
I
this
know.
conversation. If ACC can't even get $150,000 out the door in a year, I don't know why we're picking on groups that are actually creating jobs and getting
We're
things done.
not picking up that.
I just
I
feel
don't
like
know
we're
what you're talking
questioning them more than agencies that are not.
Well,
We're very much
wait
more
till Sarah Boston comes in.
fair, yeah.
No one's quite, I mean, we're thrilled with this program. Are you kidding? We helped create it.
It just,
I'm sorry.
I think proportionally it deserves more money than.
It may, but this year, everything's getting cut in half because we don't have as much money as everyone thinks we have. So Jane has just told us we have, you know, we have to cut everything in half, which leads to
I
another
can find
conversation
cuts,
we're gonna
I
have
can
with this.
find
board.
cuts for you. Okay, sorry.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, how are you all doing?
Good.
We're frustrated. How are you?
I'm frustrated too.
I know. I mean, here, the public thinks we're washing money and we aren't. It's
Yeah.
very frustrating.
Well, we are washing money, we're just spending more than we have.
We're washing certain types of money. It's qualified money.
And let's move on to nursing again.
Oh, nursing, our
So
other favorite.
Deb-
Oh,
Deb-
nurse.
I
Well-
know, great.
Welcome, Deb.
Yeah.
You've reviewed this bill, I assume, and you're representing the people on the ground that are gonna be
Correct.
hopefully helped in the
I
best
wanna-
way possible by
I want to
this bill.
thank the ladies for wearing red, representing the nurses.
Okay.
Oh, really? We just love this color.
Yeah.
So our nurses,
Senator Brock and I didn't get the email.
I'm sorry, it
That's
wasn't.
okay.
There we go.
I'm
Wearing
sorry, I
red,
didn't
you'll
know.
notice there's sharks on.
Yes, for those that don't know me, I'm Deb Snell. I'm president of AFT Vermont and the Vermont Federation of Nurses, representing the nurses and techs at the UVM Medical Center. And I am also working as a nurse in the medical intensive care unit for the last 22 years
At UVM.
at UVM. So first of all, nurses have seen this shortage coming for years, and I, for one, am finally grateful that it's getting the recognition that it deserves. However, as we've seen in our state, nurses are leaving in droves, whether it's due to retirement, childcare, housing, or student loans, they're leaving. We are extremely grateful to see money put into education for nurses, whether it's in scholarships, paying our nursing educators more, expanding nursing programs, but these are all long-term solutions and we need an immediate solution. You know, our state, it feels like our state is losing its middle class right now.
Say that again?
It feels like it feels like our state is like losing its middle class right now.
Right.
That they're leaving. So,
Oh, can I
yeah,
just ask you a question?
Mhm.
It's a very basic question. You said they're leaving in droves.
Mhm.
Are they leaving in droves just because they can get paid more in another state?
that is part of it, but part of it is, they're leaving, some of them are keeping their houses here in Vermont, but they're leaving to be able to afford to keep their houses here in Vermont.
Here come traveling nurses?
Yes,
Traveling
yeah.
nurses, or they're doing it for retirement, they're leaving so they can pay their student loans, so they can maybe afford to stay in Vermont. My concern is that they're seeing that the grass is greener on the other side, and that they are going to take a job where income and cost of living are in balance. And obviously, we know in this state that is not the case right now.
Thank you, sorry.
No, not a problem. So
Well, it's actually a big issue
it
because
is.
it's an issue on the funding piece particularly here because I don't want, I mean, quite honestly, I don't want to help feed the problem. I don't want to raise and provide all these financial incentives to Vermont nurses who are just going to gouge the system by becoming traveling nurses within the state.
Mhm.
So we're feeding the problem and I don't want us to be doing that.
So one of the thoughts that I have had and I've shared before in other committees is that nurses getting into these programs long-term through the Vermont State College systems have a commitment to stay here.
Yes.
Whether
I
it's
think that
for
is
5
essential.
years or 7 years, whatever. I mean, I don't think we can take up their whole lives, but I think it's important that they have a commitment to this state.
Well, that's your piece.
Commitment to stay here, if that commitment involves being a traveling nurse within Vermont,
Yes.
does that meet the commitment the way it's
So
drafted?
a lot of places, like
No.
including like our hospital, if you leave to go travel, you can't be hired back as a travel nurse within a year. So that is something that the hospitals are deciding, and in my opinion, that they should make that a longer term. That if you leave to go travel and you want to come back as a travel nurse, there should be at least a 5-year span between that.
So
time.
this bill, I think, has 1 year. So are you familiar with the bill?
I read it through and yeah, I think those are some of the pieces that need to be fixed.
So you think a long commitment? would be
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, even, I mean, we have, I'm getting off track here, but we have travel nurses who love it here, who love working at our hospital and want to stay. And we've had travel nurses that have had to cancel their contracts because they can't find a place to live.
We're
You know,
clear.
there have been physicians, same thing. The allied physicians coming in that can't find a place to stay. You know, I know UVM is, MNC is putting money into becoming, I always joke slumlords with this building that they're, but we have no sense. It's not gonna be all for nurses. It's not gonna be all for doctors. It could be for whatever. So it could be for travel nurses if we need it. So we don't have any idea how down the road those 61 apartments, which is like nothing compared to what the need is in our state right now.
Well, if hospitals were not paying traveling nurses the amount they're paying them, they could afford to do a lot more housing. I mean,
Yeah, no, correct.
it's at a certain
Correct.
point, that spigot has to
Yeah.
get turned off, and we have to be able to retain the huge hemorrhage of the dollars to these traveling
Yeah.
nurses.
And the problem we have in our state is attracting new nurses to come here. Not new nurses, experienced nurses, because we need experienced nurses desperately right now. And the problem is if you go online and start looking for like the best place to work as a nurse, like versus like wage, cost of living, all of that, Vermont ranks in the bottom 5. You go to Wallet Hub, we're number 48. There are videos that you can search. And if you go online, even the city of Burlington itself ranked number 47 as a place to work in like the top cities in every state. So we have a lot of barriers to overcome to attract people here.
So what do you think those barriers, what are the top barriers? Pay, housing?
Childcare and student loan debt.
Well, we've had a program to deal with that for a long time.
For out-of-state nurses coming here.
For relocating nurses. So that would go to our relocation program.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once they're here, that we have the loan repayment programs and the forgivable.
Yeah, and again, I would ask that there is a long commitment to stay here. You know, I mean, the goal of that commitment is that they're gonna start putting down roots, making friends, building a life here and want to stay. So,
But there's kind of a chicken egg, like
Right.
oh,
we have to
absolutely.
commit to the nurses so they commit
Yeah,
to us. I mean, I think, I just don't, I would hate to say that there are traveling nurses who are gouging the system. It's a
Mhm.
broken system that
It
they're
is.
trying to operate within,
Mhm.
where, as you know, they get their contracts maybe just renewed or to start just a couple weeks before they're supposed to
Mhm.
find housing. So the hospital, at least UVM Medical, will say, well, we're giving you enough money to find a hotel, which even the hotels are hard to find. But
Yeah.
if you give people so little notice to relocate their lives, that's expensive, and
Yeah.
that's not their fault that it's expensive to do that in a system that's not working.
yeah. But again, it's the need for experienced nurses. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm having pretty significant spine surgery next week. And I'm a little nervous about it because the floor that I'm designated to go to is all travelers and brand new grads. And last time I was I've been in our hospital as a patient a few times, and I've always gotten amazing care, and I'm a little nervous about it. Even in the OR, we have like 40% travel nurses. Our emergency department right now is 55% travel nurses.
Your ER is 55%?
Correct.
Oh my God.
What constitutes a travel nurse?
A travel nurse, the billing rate for the hospital is anywhere between $150 and $200 is what they pay.
How much?
Between $150 and $200
An hour?
an hour is what they're,
On-
that's not what the nurse makes, that's what the company bills the hospital for that nurse.
Is it just a temporary at-will employment? Is that, what is the definition of a A traveling nurse. not
A travel nurse's contract is usually 13 weeks.
Okay.
Sometimes they could resign. I know right now our hospital, and this, I mean, I hate to say like this pettiness going on between the Green Mountain Care Board and our hospital right now. I mean, we had our first contract negotiation last Wednesday, and the first thing out of their mouths is basically, we're so poor. And because of the Green Mountain Care Board decision, we're not gonna have money for anything. And I know that we just got that 10% wage increase, which was long overdue. And people are still leaving.
When did you get the 10% wage?
It started February 7th.
Can you say you're still waiting?
No. I'm saying that with that wage increase, people are still leaving.
Oh, leaving, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
people are still leaving.
So, but that would point to other things, because with that 10%,
Exactly.
does that bring us comparable to Northern New York State, for example, for nurse pay? I mean, where does that make us comparable to or not?
So we're still lagging behind slightly, even like in upstate New York, just because of the cost of living. Even though it is rising there slightly, it still doesn't balance us out.
What would balance us out?
Well, what I would like to see, and I know you're talking about how money is kind of tight right now, but a significant tax credit for healthcare workers. I mean, right now, I know the governor had proposed in his initial budget, 15,400,000 as a tax care credit for like LPNs, RNs, APRNs. So I believe.
We just have to find that replacement. So it's a great idea, but then you have to come to us and say, how are we replacing that hole in our budget? How are we replacing that revenue loss? Because every tax credit means we don't have money to give to somebody else that's in need. So
But
I
if you
mean,
attract more workers to our state,
yeah, but it's still, it's a whole, that every proposal about a tax, it's a tax expenditure, it's an expenditure, so we.
well, I think you have to also balance the fact that we are an aging state and you're not gonna have anyone to take care of us in a few
Right.
years.
There's that.
Period. I mean, they are leaving. Our experienced nurses are leaving. And having a hospital with all new, brand new nurses is not a safe place to be. Or to work.
They're leaving, where are they going?
I mean,
Where's the
I,
greener pastures, in other words?
Yeah.
What's there that isn't
well, a
here?
lot of nurses are moving to more southern states or even like the Midwest. So for instance, with the tax care credit the way it is right now in the governor's budget plan, which I know is kind of like off the table right now, that would be like $2,500 roughly per nurse. A nurse can make that easily in a week on a
This is
travel
the
assignment.
tax credit.
With the 15.4 million divided by like roughly
Well,
6,000.
I'm looking at the governor's tax relief proposal, and for nurses' tax credit, proposing that every registered nurse, advanced practice registered nurse, licensed practical nurse, licensed nursing assistant, and nurse educator who lives in Vermont and works for a Vermont healthcare provider receive a $1,000 annual refundable tax credit.
Yeah.
Now,
But
apparently, it's part of a larger retention recruitment package,
Yeah.
but that's the tax credit piece.
Yeah, but in his initial budget, he said 15.4 million, and it was just nurses, it didn't include the LNAs at that point. And that one was like $2,500, which again, in $1,000,
Not much.
that's nothing. That really is nothing for most people, for
So
most.
then, do you think that the things, the provisions in this bill are more meaningful? We have loan forgiveness, we have loan repayment, we have a lot of things in this bill. Are they more valuable?
They're valuable for younger nurses, but nurses who have experience, whose loans are already paid off, what is the incentive for them to stay?
Well, you just mentioned some, which is that love their communities, have kids in the school system. I'd love to know what the comparable pay needs to be for pay to be a reason people stay, so that that's not a
Well,
reason for
pay
people to
is
leave.
a reason people stay, but all of our hospitals are in such a financial crunch right now. It's just like, I mean, we have a number of proposals on the table at our hospital, and we think they're proposals that will help people stay. I mean, obviously, the wage increase did not do it, because people are still leaving. So we are looking at, improved differentials, improved healthcare. Because, as the largest hospital in the state, our healthcare, costs keep increasing like 18% over the last 2 years. And I know the hospital, I'm gonna get into like hospital politics now, but like they changed providers on us because they were hopefully trying to incorporate the New York State side from the network into our healthcare system. So they switched from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont to Blue Cross Blue Shield Alliance of South Carolina because they would deal with out of state versus Vermont would not. And the problem is the New York State nurses pay zero for their healthcare insurance. And now we're asking them to pay what we pay, and why would they want to do that? So their plan failed on incorporating this new number, which would reduce their rate, so now we're paying for it. So I mean, it's all these like little things that keep adding up, but the overall picture is that it used to be the younger nurses that were going to like leave and travel. We have this reputation in our hospital that people come, get their year or two of experience in like the academic medical center, and they're out the door because they can make more money anywhere, traveling or, again, cost of living. But now it's our more experienced nurses that are leaving or retiring. We've lost 500 nurses in the last 2 years at our hospital, whether through retirement, traveling, restriction, whatever.
In the last year,
2 years.
in the last 2 years. And that's partly pandemic, I mean, that's also partly the challenge of what we've just
But
all gone through.
even before COVID, this was a problem in our hospital. And right now, even at our hospital, we have 400 nurses over the age of 65 that are still working.
Oh, you have experience. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm 66 and
If they
Yeah,
all
what's-
decide
what-
to retire, frankly, we're screwed.
yeah, right.
You know,
Well, there's that.
And that's a strong possibility because with as great as these educational programs we're talking about are, again, it's long-term. It's gonna take years to get us there.
Right.
Those nurses may be gone and
So,
they can work anywhere in the state if they decide to stay.
so Jeff, when you're fully staffed, how many nurses does UVM? If you've lost 500 and you're still
So
functioning, how
right now-
many nurses are there?
Yeah, so right now, there's about 1,900 nurses, but that includes people who work per diem and part-time. So we are for nurses right now at a 22% vacancy rate. The LNAs in our hospital, we're at a 27% vacancy rate. So even though travelers are helping with that, hospitals are trying to get rid of travelers because of the high cost. I totally get that, good. However, what that means is the nurses that are there are working harder and longer hours and picking up overtime to the point where they're getting burnt out because they feel guilty leaving their floor so short-staffed.
Right.
So the hospital is paying incentive pay, which is basically twice their hourly rate to get nurses to come in. So that's not entirely cost effective either.
So
So
it's cheaper than traveling nurses.
it's still cheaper than travel nurses, but not by much.
So Deb, have you testified, did you testify in the House on this bill?
Not yet, no. But I've been in close contact with like Maury and.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Right.
Mari's a colleague of yours.
Yeah.
Have you testified in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee at all?
Not this year, no.
Okay. Because one of the things that I haven't formally mentioned this to the committee, but Senator Lyons has been after me for a few days now, saying she wants to give recommendations to us on how we should spend our healthcare workforce dollars. You
Yeah.
might want to contact her.
Yeah, no, I will be in
And I
touch with her.
appreciate Senator Lyons' offer. I mean, it's ultimately our decision, but just like appropriation was asking us for the overall thing. You know, we can benefit from a substantive committee that deals with the world of healthcare every day, as opposed to us just hearing about this.
Yeah.
you know.
And I will say that one of my biggest concerns right now is that nursing licensure compact. Because I know the thought was it would bring nurses here.
That was our hope.
Well,
Yeah, right.
I testified against that bill multiple times because I strongly believe that, first of all, if nurses come here, where are they gonna live? you know, there's no housing available. But that bill is making it super easy for nurses to leave and go to states. And the states that are a part of the compact are states that do have affordable cost of living. It's not New York and Massachusetts and California. It's all the states in the South and in the Midwest that I talked about where nurses are going to travel right now. And right now, I think I heard in the city of Burlington, there's like a 2-month wait list for fingerprinting. And that is part of that. And that's honestly scared the heck out of me, thinking how many nurses are waiting for their fingerprints to get their multi-state license to leave. So.
Yes, the licensure does cut both ways.
Mhm.
But it also is one of the low-hanging fruit pieces when we did that work
Mhm.
of reducing barriers to bringing nurses into the state. So
Are you getting any nurses from overseas?
No, we are not. And I will be honest with you, the hospital did propose something along those lines at one time. And the company that they were working with said they placed nurses in the hospital and that most of those nurses decided to stay there, but they have a contract of 2 or 3 years with the hospital. And we said, if they're going to be working in a hospital, they deserve to be part of our union and have all the same rights and benefits as our members. So at that point in time, I think that the whole thing just kind of like fell through with the person who was running the
And where
program.
were the people coming from?
Majority were from the Philippines.
I was gonna say the Philippines is
Yeah.
I suspect, yeah.
a huge training system for
Yeah.
LPNs.
Yeah.
Is there any thought, it sounds, maybe you just touched on it seems like a right area for bringing more nurses in is the traveling nurses themselves.
Mhm.
Say they're here, and can you offer them signing bonuses or
Mhm.
housing?
Yeah, I mean, there are, the problem, and I'm part of several committees in the hospital, but they're honestly, they're committees that talk a lot and don't see a lot of action. Where they're offering $10,000 sign-on bonuses to new nurses, and they're only asking for a 1-year commitment, which is absurd, honestly. But again, there's the way they're paying it out. If someone leaves before that year is out, they just like lose on the tail end of it. They do have some other programs as well, and like even coming into like critical care, we asked for a 2-year commitment, but there's no way to make people stay. And like I said, once they get their 2-year training, a lot of them leave. You know, it's just the way it is right now.
And it's true, this is true. I mean, we are not unique in this.
No.
I mean, this is true almost in every state, from what I've understood.
Yeah, no, for academic medical centers, yes. But I mean, our other hospitals, I mean, I know that Porter, I mean, they're competing with outside of their system. Brattleboro is competing with Massachusetts, and it's like, how do we keep up? What do we do? And again, recruitment is a wonderful thing, and I'm so grateful for the money for the college systems and expanding these programs, but Vermont is in no way, shape, or form at this point in time able to create enough nurses within our own system to meet the needs of our patients and our
So
community.
just turning to the bill for a second, you mentioned that you would think it jumped out at you the requirement for people to get scholarships or you think that they should be required to stay longer.
Mhm.
Anything else that you see as a core here that we might change in this bill?
You know, I think the majority of it is like more in the hospital's control, honestly. You know, and that's why I came to you to talk about the tax credits as a way to keep people here. And that's not in any way, shape, or means to take away from the education money or the money for other departments. Like, I was so impressed with the previous testimony, listening to that.
Yes.
I know I have a son in the same situation who needs an apprenticeship desperately because he can't get a job without the experience from his college degree. So I totally appreciate that piece. But my concern is, what are we doing right now to stem the tide and stop the bleed?
So what do we do immediately? I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here takes time. So what is an immediate thing other than building immediate housing?
Well, and that's why
Of the tax cuts.
the tax.
What
cuts.
about the preceptor part of the bill? We
Yeah.
heard you talk about that. Do you know anything about, have you read that section?
I did, and it was a little, I found it a little confusing, to be honest with you, because the preceptor term is used in different ways, and we weren't sure if it actually meant nurses in the hospital working as preceptors, because there are clinical instructors which come from the university that teach in the hospital, or there are just like nurse-to-nurse interactions, like I could be teaching a new grad or something. And that's one thing that we asked for in our bargaining, honestly, is a preceptor differential, which we've never had before. But we didn't know if money from this particular package would also help pay for that. Or is that strictly for
I
the
believe that's
clinical
what it's
instructors?
designed for.
Yeah.
I think that the idea was that it's explained to us that preceptor work is, in significant part, has been voluntary. in the
It has
past.
been,
So the
absolutely.
nurses allow a
Mhm.
student to follow them around
Yeah.
and watch what they're doing.
Yeah,
And this would give compensation of $5 an hour for having somebody, agreeing to have someone tap
Yeah.
along.
which is interesting because the hospital proposed $250 an hour for it. So,
So you actually, as a nurse, have the authority to say, yeah, let them come, or no, I don't want anybody watching me?
yeah, I mean, we're asked, some people do it a lot, some people really enjoy it, some people will do it for a while and say, oh God, I can't take another student right now. Because it does take a lot of time, and sometimes you're in situations, especially in critical care, where you just have to like move, and it's hard to like teach when a patient is in a crisis and you're trying to like teach as well as take care. So people kind of get like tired of that, and it is hard work, just, keeping up with all their training and signing off on all their paperwork. And there's a lot of responsibilities
I
that go
just
into
can't believe
reception.
that the hospital doesn't have a formal process there. It's a, you either do it or get paid for it, or, just to leave it to the discretion of their staff.
Well,
is kinda
and
weird.
and the nurse educators usually get involved with, because some people are good teachers and some people
Yeah,
maybe
not
not so
everybody's
much.
a good teacher.
I know, I used to teach clinical for VTC, I loved it, but then they told me I had to get my master's, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going back to school to get my master's to make less money, so,
Well, that's also what we're trying
Yeah.
to address here as nurse educators.
yes, absolutely.
So, well, that's interesting. Yes, because we had at one point thought doctors had in their contract that got more if they took on students, but I think Devin has told me that's not the case.
It's part of part of an academic medical center.
But for
Expected
those
to teach.
hospitals that are not academic centers like Mount Scottney, it does make sense to reward, I suppose, nurses who take on this
Well, isn't
additional.
it sort of like I hate to say it this way, but isn't it sort of like a supply chain issue? They can't get enough people to get their clinical hours unless these people
Well,
right,
volunteer.
unless these people volunteer.
As a preceptor.
But to go to your initial, for me, the preceptor thing is a responsibility of the medical school, or whatever school is training them, the nursing program. To me, it's the cost of educating a
Yeah.
student. And so why is, again, it's state dollars, but it strikes me that it's UVM Medical School's responsibility to pay that $5 an hour, or VTC's responsibility, or CCV's.
Well, it's different between having a student and having like a new grad that you're training on the job. We have a unit right now where the majority of staff are travelers, and travelers are training our new staff on that unit because there's not enough regular staff on that unit.
Well, I would think travelers are getting paid enough to take on several students.
But they don't know our system and our
Oh, I see what
protocols,
you mean,
and
yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting recommendations from the Kid Lions Committee.
But the takeaway for me is that if we do something, it might be a match with the hospitals, but they need to start compensating in the long term people for
Yeah.
doing. The state can't
Yeah.
fill this gap, this is on the job training,
Yeah.
which people should be
And
compensated.
I mean, I know that at Porter and Brattleboro, where I represent, that they do get at least a small differential
Yeah.
for it. At UVMC, we've been fighting for it for years, and now they're finally saying, oh, here.
So
Here's
that, it
this
feels
doing-
like it's uneven, like some
Yeah.
hospitals have been doing the right thing and UVM hasn't. And
Yeah.
that's just not fair that
Yeah.
we're paying them when they haven't been doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That we should just be, I mean, if anything, I think we should be saying, we direct you or something to be paying people for, because that's just, it contributes to the nursing shortage, but it shouldn't be our long-term responsibility.
I agree, that's what I was trying to say, is
Yeah.
I really think it's a responsibility of both the hospital and the educating institution.
Yeah, they have to teach the
Yeah.
person's paying tuition to go to nursing school. The nursing school should make sure they get the clinical education.
Yes, exactly, it's a piece
Gotta
of
be
the
mandated.
education.
Yeah.
But in some cases, that's a Vermont State college, so
Yeah.
we're paying for that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have more you'd like to add? We're gonna take a short break.
No, I think I've covered everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for being here.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for your service.
Yes.
But just quickly before you go, would you, to clarify the preceptor section,
Mhm.
what would you do to clarify that section? Because I think that,
I think that just to make it clear that it's not like the clinical instructors from the state colleges that are going in and teaching the students.
No,
That is for nurses working in the hospital that are taking
I
on
think we understand. I think we
new
understood that.
graduates.
Right.
I mean, we're asking for like the new graduates
Right.
and, nurses coming to our unit and the travelers. We're asking for a differential when we have to precept travelers to our unit as well. So,
Thank you, Nancy.
thank you very much.
Thank
Let's
Take
take
care.
a, let's